The Battle of Piltown, 1462, was fought in Kilkenny, and for an early historian in Irish medieval history in 1923, Edward Curtis considered this the Easter Rising of the medieval period. He considered this the Battle of Irish Independence. Why is this? And why don't we hear about it today? Which is a question I really have, and hopefully going through the research which I have and laying it all out in this video, we can examine why we haven't even heard of the Battle of Piltown. Why haven't the Irish heard of the Battle of Piltown when this is the foundation of our war of independence against the English? Furthermore, this is the FitzGeralds fighting for an Irish independent parliament. And yet we don't hear about this. If you cover the history of the Irish parliament on Wikipedia, it gets skipped on. This whole period gets skipped on. In fact, the only thing you can find online to do with the rise of the Irish parliament and independent Irish parliament is a side note of Ireland taking part in the War of the Roses. That's shocking to me, to be quite honest with you. It's shocking that we have an independent Ireland in 1460 and we have a battle called the Battle of Piltown in 1462 and we don't talk about it. We don't cover it in school. We don't even cover it in university. It's just not covered on. And yet Edward Curtis, a IRA supporter, considered the Battle of Piltown the Irish independence, the fight for Irish independence in the medieval period. I've said before that this period, just after the 100 Years' War, many countries in Europe start to identify themselves and start to put down the foundation of their modern nationalism. And you can see that in the Battle of Piltown. Now, I'm not saying this is 100% Irish people here. It's not. It's Anglo-Irish people, and it's an umbrella term for FitzGerald's people and army in this period. He was governing people from the most independent Gaelic all the way to English who were proud royalist Yorkists. And they were fighting the Butlers who were looking to come and take away their Irish Parliament away from them. And that's exactly what the FitzGeralds were fighting for in the Battle of Piltown. Let's cover this, let's dive in. Now, there are two reasons for the Battle of Piltown between the Butlers and the FitzGeralds. The first reason is the one I slightly hinted on there, which is the fighting between the Irish Parliament, between the FitzGeralds and the Butlers. The second reason was for their ownership over Kildare. John Butler, the 6th Earl of Ormond, had inherited Kildare on his mother's side. However, of course, the FitzGeralds completely disputed this. They had a strong link going all the way back to the coming of the Normans in Ireland, and they weren't ready to give it up now. So, of course, the Battle of Piltown was the decisive battle of who had ownership over Kildare. The second reason for it is the reason I had highlighted earlier over the Irish Parliament. The FitzGeralds had pretty much taken a good control of the Irish Parliament with the other Anglo-Irish nobles and had gone independent from the English crown. This was something that the Irish had been pushing on for quite some time now. In fact, as part of the documentation with the Magna Carta, when the barons would rebel against King John in the first place, the Irish had continued their independence from English Parliament, had only built up on that over time. When Irish barons were summoned to England to bring in effect laws into Ireland, the Irish barons completely refused. According to Irish law, for them to bring law into place, all of the Irish barons had to be in an Irish Parliament in Ireland, and they had to agree together what laws to bring in place. If an Irish baron wasn't present, those laws couldn't be implemented in his territory. That was how the Irish Parliament had worked. So slowly but surely over time, the Irish Parliament had gone independent from the English Parliament and the English Crown. By 1460, when the Yorkists are pushing to be kings of England, they need support, and the FitzGeralds decide to gamble on the Yorkists. So they force the Yorkists to sign a treaty with them, basically recognising the Irish Parliament independent from the Crown. Although they still recognise the King of England, they wanted the Irish Parliament independent. So when the Yorkists win the Battle of Piltown in 1461, this gave the FitzGeralds the independence they wanted in Ireland and the Irish Parliament with the Irish barons. However, the Butlers, on the other hand, were loyal to Lancastrians, and they wanted to take back not just the land that they wanted in Kildare, but to take back all the lands and territories they'd lost to the FitzGeralds. The only way they seen to do that was to restore the English crown in Ireland with the Lancastrians. In 1560, the FitzGeralds were able to capture Waterford. Waterford at the time was a Yorkist settlement, and this was a huge victory for the FitzGeralds, capturing it from the Lancastrians. However, the Butlers had already been on the run since the end of the Battle of Wakefield, when the Yorkists had beaten them. So the Butlers were out hiding in the north of England. In 1462, the Butlers, led by John Butler, had reorganised themselves and had gone down to Waterford and had recaptured it. Gearóid FitzGerald was captured in Waterford by the Butlers during a siege. From there, the Butlers were able to not just raise an army in Waterford, but they had also sent out letters to their settlements in Tipperary and Kilkenny, where they were able to raise a significant force. When the FitzGeralds had gotten wind of this, they had marched their army down to Waterford, where they then agreed on a place and a location to do battle. John Butler disagreed with this. He wanted it to be a siege in Waterford. However, Edmund Butler completely wanted an open field battle. Edmund Butler wanted the battle to take place in Kilkenny. The reason for this is to encourage more loyalists to the Lancastrian cause to join their side. The starting location of the battle is here at Sham Castle, just at the roundabout of Piltown. The FitzGeralds' forces, the Irish Parliament, the Anglo-Irish, were lined up on the southern side at the start of the battle, and that's very important. The Butlers were stretched out on the northern side of the battle. What's also really important is that the FitzGeralds have a mixture of Gaelic and English in their forces. They have longbowmen and they have Ridere, Irish style knights. Furthermore, they have Gallowglass and they have Kerns, who were barefooted to my knowledge, and that's vitally important given that the ground and terrain is exceptionally boggy and very easy to trip on. The Butlers' side, on the other hand, the majority of them are English, with English armour and English weapons, not adapted and customised for the Irish terrain, and that's vitally important for this battle. Both sides have their levies as well, which are made up of Gaelic Bonocta and the Anglo-Irish Billmen. Although both sides have access to cannons, they weren't used in this battle, most likely because of the boggy terrain. Very little information is given on the battle itself. However, it appears that Edmund Butler had rushed in against the Billmen and had been captured early on in the battle. Not a good start for the Butlers, and this would only get worse over time. As I was saying before, the important key here of the whole battle is that the Anglo-Irish were adjusted, their equipment was adjusted for this battle, where the Butlers themselves had used the latest English kit for England. So the English, the Butlers, were adjusted for England, where the FitzGeralds were an all-rounder and perfect for this battle. They had longbowmen, they had adjusted levies, they had nobles who were adjusted for this battle, where the Butlers were 100%, well, a good 80% English orientated, with 20% for their levies. That's not good, and it didn't take very long for them to lose their footing during this battle. When both sides clashed, a lot of the butlers would have tripped and fallen over the boggy ground. Even their horses would have found it very difficult to gallop to flank around during this battle. We know that there's a flank because, as I was saying earlier, the FitzGeralds had started on the southern part of the battlefield. Somehow the FitzGeralds had adjusted themselves, so now they were on the northern side and pushing the butlers back to the river. So one could easily imagine that the FitzGeralds were tripping and falling with their kit, sliding and slipping, where the Irish were more adjusted because they were bare-legged, they were barefooted, which means they had a better grip on the ground, which means when they had the long pushes, when they were pushing the English back, the English would have been falling and slipping. Also do know that although the butlers didn't start off with a great start, and that the Anglo-Irish themselves were well adjusted to this battle, it still must have been 50-50, or at least seen as a 50-50 battle, because this was a very long battle that started off early in the morning and lasted a good chunk of the day, which means that both sides had seen themselves as equal, and that as the FitzGeralds had pushed the butlers down to the river, that the whole battle was very 50-50, as slowly but surely both sides were grinding each other up. This wasn't a nice battle. One trustworthy source claims that 410 bodies were starting to pile from the start of the battle at Sham Castle all the way down to the river, as the FitzGeralds were slowly grinding up the butlers. What eventually happened, at some stage John Butler must have figured out he wasn't winning this battle and fled. This caused a rout within the butlers themselves as they tried to run down to the river and escape. The FitzGeralds were right on top of them, pushing them into the river, hacking them and smashing them. Piltown, as it's called, is a play on words on Bloody River. It was at this point that the majority of the butlers would start to get butchered and killed. It's believed that 1,000 bodies were starting to stack up in the river itself, as the FitzGeralds just continued hacking them and even throwing some of the bodies into the river to drown them and kill them. This caused their bodies to build up like a dam, blocking up the river with red blood trickling through the bodies. In the aftermath of the battle, it's believed that John Butler would flee back to Waterford, where he was later captured after the siege of Waterford perhaps, but the siege itself mustn't have lasted very long, as they wouldn't have the troops to go against the FitzGeralds, so most likely Waterford did surrender and hand over John Butler. With John Butler captured, he was then forced into ransom. As part of this ransom, John Butler had to give up his claim within both the Irish Parliament and his belief of the lands of Kildare. He was handed back to his family. However, if you think this was the end of it, this was actually only the start of a far bigger picture. As I said at the start of this video, in 1460, the FitzGeralds had gotten themselves an independent Irish Parliament, and it wasn't long until the O'Donnells, the King of the North, had recognised and gone into a friendship alliance with the Irish Parliament. Furthermore, so did the O'Conors, the Kings of Connaught. Between the O'Conors dominating the west of Ireland, the O'Donnells dominating the north of Ireland, and the FitzGeralds dominating both the south and the east of Ireland, Ireland was in the pocket of the FitzGeralds. And in the 1490s, when the Tudors would turn around and consider the FitzGeralds kings all but in name, you can see why. Returning back to the period in itself, the following year after the Battle of Piltown, the English right away, the Yorkists, who had gotten the majority of their support from the FitzGeralds, were already plotting to remove the Irish Parliament and put it back in line. John Butler would be restored and given back his titles. He would then be put as Lord Deputy back in Dublin. Thomas FitzGerald would have his status within the Lordship of Ireland removed. Thomas FitzGerald, the head of the FitzGerald clan, would be beheaded for breaking the statutes of Kilkenny because he'd become too Gaelicised. This is the real starting point of 400 years of fighting between the English and the Irish. As the medieval period comes to an end, we see the foundations of the Irish Parliament. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. It really does mean a lot, since I just need another 1,000 hours of viewing time, which isn't very much for me until I start getting paid again. Other than that, guys, thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe and like the channel. If you want some merchandise, myself and Clans and Dynasties have organised that as well. We need to get back into it and update it, but we've been so busy. You can see in this project alone, it took a lot of work. And we really appreciate you watching these videos and giving us back your feedback. I love the community that's been built up around this. If you want to be a part of the community, it costs absolutely nothing. We're over on Facebook, we're also on Instagram, and we're also on Twitter. Although I've been quite busy and haven't been posting a lot, I'm going to try to get back into that as well. And I'm going to get even more organized as YouTube is changing. I'm trying to change with it and get more stuff up in there, because there's a demand now for me to start posting shorts and other stuff of the likes. So I will be getting involved with that as well, because you guys seem to really like all this stuff, and I like it too, so I'll be getting more involved. Anyway guys, all the best.